I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Henry Confidential. We are back with Real Debates. We have a fun one because we have a debater that's super experienced in just both here now as well as over on Movie Battleground. Shout out Movie Battleground making the comeback. And then we have a newbie in Erick Moreno. By the way, Tato, in case you didn't have that obviousness from the thumbnail. But we have Tato, who's very experienced, and then Erick, who's working. He's pretty much a 50-50 now in terms of judging and actual debating. So I'm curious to see how that's going to translate now in this next debate. But let's go first into Tato. Tato, without going into specifics on the questions, what are your overall thoughts on your opponent as well as just kind of what to expect, on paper?
Yeah, Erick, pretty green. So, is he going to be one of those players who skyrockets like immediately from that first to second performance kind of thing? Or is he going to slowly get better? I don't think Erick's going to stay the same. I definitely think he's going to be getting better. We'll just see how fast that happens. Obviously, for me, I had to suck for reasons for several matches straight before I became good and started skyrocketing myself, I think is a fair assessment of how my debate skills went. So we will see what happens overall. I don't really know what to expect as a result of just not having seen him play as much as I have any other given opponent I would usually have. Yeah. So I am definitely curious to see what he comes with. One of these ones, I think, definitely. I won't get too much into the specifics, like you said, but I think it should be a fun
match. All right, I just made sure my mic is on my, is on my thing. But all right, so let's go ahead into Erick. Erick, obviously, kind of Tato touched on a little bit of you being green. I don't think that has anything to do with your card. But how are you feeling about this debate? And by the way, good luck on the weather behind the scenes.
Yeah. So far, so good. Hopefully, stays that way. Yeah, I got no need for a green card. I'm a U.S. citizen, in case you didn't know. That's kind of funny. Tato is a hell of a player. I think the very first match I judged was him playing. I voted against him a couple of times, so hopefully that doesn't diminish him too much. But I do think he's a really good debater. He's a really good player overall in everything. I think highly of him as a player, so that's why I prep a little bit more than usual, mostly because now I'm how you say I got a match on my back. Like I already played, so I kind of know what to expect of a debate as a player now. I do take notes also for like there was a lot of good points I left out in my last match that I hopefully I don't leave in the very next couple fun questions, which all questions are pretty good. We picked good categories and you made good questions out of them. So props to you as well.
Shout out. All right. So with that said, bring Tato in. And then just a reminder, in case this is your guys' first experience on Real Debates, a little different than other debate leagues, in the past, present, and future. But what we have is we have 4 prep questions that the debaters are just going to go from 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we are going to save the judging into the end. So I want to give a shout out to Chad Webb and John Marr, co-judging with me as well. They're in the background, hardworking, multitasking, and just being awesome dads. Shout out them. But so we won't see them for about an hour. The goal is to be around that hour mark, as always. So with that said, gentlemen, are you ready?
Who's going first?
We will. I haven't done one of these in a while. So good. GGs. All right. All right. We're gonna toss this tape, measuring tape. Wow, that word was in my head. But all right. Tato, heads or tails?
Tails.
Heads. Grandpa, Mr. Fix It. So Erick, do you want to close on questions 1 and 3 or 2 and 4?
I want to close in 1 and 3.
So we have the order right. So Tato, you're going to be starting off. Just a reminder, in between for the 1 minutes. So we don't have any pitches today. So everything is going to be 1, 5, and 1. So for the 1 minutes, I will just when you first begin speaking. So it'll just be you two, and then the timer will start at the bottom when you begin speaking. So Tato, start off with you. First question is going to be in the category of James.
Hold on, sorry, 1 sec. I'm gonna close my window. Just
okay. He can hear us, so I'm gonna. This is just for the people at home. Question in the category of James Bond. What is the most underrated Bond character within the Daniel Craig Bonds? All right, so that's about 5 films. 5 films.
Yeah,
So to choose from.
I really wanted to talk about George Lazenby movies, but that's only one.
Could you imagine the question? What is the most underrated Bond character within the George Lazenby Bond films? All right, so Tato, we saved you a little bit of time, so now I'm going to go out. 1 minute in your opening when you begin.
alrighty. The most underrated Bond character in the Daniel Craig entries is Dominic Green, played by Mateo Amalric in Quantum of Solace. I'm not going to sit here and pretend he's the best Bond villain ever, because that's not my point in his rating. My point is that he is a completely serviceable, middle of the road Bond villain. Yet he kind of appears at the bottom 5 of any given list of Bond villain rankings. Another interesting thing worth noting is that Mateo Malrick has noted that he based his Dominic Green character on Tony Blair, so why he acts the way he acts actually makes sense, and I think a lot of people just didn't understand that point. Plus the line, if you do not sign the paper, you will wake up with your balls in your mouth and your willing replacement standing over you, is fucking fire, and for sure not a bottom 5 worthy performance at all.
And time. All right, Eric, 1 minute. 1 minute when you begin.
For one, I'm very happy that Tato picked this movie as well, because it made it easier for me to pick a character. I picked the Bond girl in that very same movie, Quantum of Solace, the most underrated one out of the Craig ones, which isn't a great movie, but it's solid. And that's the same thing for Camille Montes, the character played by Olga Kurylenko, the main Bond girl. She is one that should stand out more in between the Bond girl rankings, because she is very different to every Bond girl that's ever been including the Craig movies. She's one of the only ones who has a platonic relationship with Bond. She is one that actually has an emotional connection to Bond, that it's not a romantic one, but it's developed by trauma and the relationship between each other, that they're looking for the same goal, which is revenge in the movie. She has a revenge against General Medrano, a character in the same movie, and Bond doesn't actually have a revenge against Dominic Green, but Mr. White, a bigger bad guy in the saga. And Camille Montes is actually played pretty great by Olga Kurylenko, so she's very underrated in that aspect. She deserves more credit than she gets.
And time. All right. The openings are out the way. So just a reminder, 5 minutes when the first person begins speaking. When there's 1 minute remaining, the 1 minute timer will pop up on screen.
Who talks first? Do I talk? Do you talk?
You can go
Star
ahead.
Wars. I'm gonna say that Olga Kurylenko is also perfectly serviceable, middle of the road in terms of being a Bond girl. Yet she got some awards nominations, obviously not Oscars or anything, but like Saturn Awards, other smaller awards and stuff like that. So I think if anything, she's overrated, because looking at watching the movie, I have not seen Bond movies before, so this is new. I'm glad I finally got into it and whatnot. But for me, what I saw was just perfectly that, like, their performances were pretty damn similar. Yet Matthew, Mateo Amalric as Dominic Green gets shit on. Yet she got awards nominations and is constantly in like top 10 lists. So they're like, from what I saw, similar performances. She's ranked high, he's ranked low. So I think the rankings are way off. I think she's overrated, if anything. Sorry.
I think she's very overshadowed by the other Bond girls, especially if you're talking about the Craig movies, especially overshadowed by Bess Verlin. Well, a fact that the movie actually recognized that there's no way Bond gets over Bess Verlin, the greatest character, the greatest Bond girl in his saga and pretty much overall. she is overshadowed by Eva Green, and then she's overshadowed by Leah Seydoux in the other movies. She gets to play her role a lot better, so that's a lot better. She's way better than middle of the road. She has actually a character development in that she finally accomplished her revenge goals. She actually has a good connection with Bond. She actually has trauma and more of a. She's more than a one-dimensional serviceable character as opposed to Matthew Almoric, which he is actually like he deserves that placement because the issues with the movie are related to with his character itself. He's a placement villain, a stop goal only there to explain the quantum and all that. Pretty much the issue with the movie is that it's forgettable, and the most forgettable part of that movie is the character itself. Like he doesn't bring up anything new to the movies. Like a bad businessman has been seen a lot in the Bond franchise, and he doesn't accomplish anything. That's why he's way below rank in the movies. He doesn't add anything new to the franchise. That's why he's way below.
Yeah, I agree. He doesn't add anything new. That's why he's getting perfectly middle of the road, whereas he's treated as super shitty as opposed to middle of the road, as you just kind of said he is. He doesn't add anything new, but he doesn't really take away anything. As far as her getting overshadowed by Vesper Lynd, I would also say that, Dominic gets overshadowed by Mads Mikkelsen's character. Yeah, because Casino Royale is obviously just the better movie, so we both had that knock against us.
He's overshadowed by the characters in the movie itself. Like he's overshadowed by General Medrano, played much better by Joaquin Cosio. He's overshadowed by Mr. White. The fact that he doesn't have an emotional connection to either Olga Kurylenko's character and James Bond, like it kind of diminishes his role. Like he is not important at all. That his death is left to the imagination of us. Like when they say he died by drinking motor oil and getting shot in the head. He's such an important character.
I think that's badass.
Yeah, but we don't see it like that. That's kind of a shame. That like if he were a more, he's not neither a physical threat nor an intellectual threat to any of them. Like he's only rich, which every other Bond villain is rich. That's why he's way below the rankings. He deserves to be way below the rankings, as opposed to Olga Kurylenko as Camille Montes, which actually, like, there's a particular scene when she's about to die by fire. Like she asked Bond to shoot her. Like that's way more than most Bond girls. That's why she deserves a higher ranking. That's why she's even in her ranking in some lists. I didn't check many lists that's going on Bond. Like I've been a big fan for a while. Like she deserves more credit because she actually has a character as opposed to many Bond girls.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if she's even really like. Sure, she's maybe a bit better than Strawberry Fields in this movie too. Like, so I'll give her that. Why not? But overall, with what you're saying by Dominic Green being overshadowed by a bunch of other people in this movie is why I think he is underrated. I agree with you on all those points that he is overshadowed by those other characters. So I think that is just another reason why he should be considered the more underrated of the two.
I think that there's a very particular way to look at underrated. Underrated is mostly seen by me at the very least as something to deserve more credit. And Dominic Green is not a character that deserves more credit. He is way below the rankings of every Bond villain, especially in his franchise in this era of Bond. Like he doesn't deserve that much because he doesn't add anything new. He's no emotional connection, no particular, well, except for that line, which was pretty funny. I give you that, but he doesn't have anything more than that.
And time. I forgot I pop up on screen, so I was trying to get comfortable as I'm watching, and then boom, got a little bit of leg action in there. All right. So with that said, we're going into the closings. 1 minute when Tato begins speaking.
Yeah, once again, I just I really think that they're both perfectly, like, very similar performances. Sure, she has a little more emotional depth and stuff, but I think he is the more underrated because of that whole overshadowed situation. Overall, like I said, I think they're both here, but he's treated badly and she is ranked too highly. Like I said, she got those awards nominations, which I don't think she deserved at all. I didn't really get to touch on their accent work. He's a French character being played by a French actor. It makes more sense than the Bolivian character being played by the Ukrainian French actress. So that level of their performances, his is actually a little better than hers, and I don't think that's ever talked about. Overall, he's on the bottom 5 of a lot of lists. I don't think he's a bottom 5 Bond villain. I think he's a middle of the road Bond villain. She's at the top 10 of a lot of lists. I don't think she's a top 10 Bond girl. I think she's a middle of the road Bond girl. 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
I don't think we should reward mediocrity. He's a good accent because he's playing the role. To be fair, Olga Kurylenko's playing a half Bolivian, half Russian character. That's why her accent is like that. She's actually playing half Russian, so give her credit for that. I think she is more important in this particular movie than even Dominic Green, which he gets overshadowed for good reason. He doesn't add like his motivation, like being environmental related, has been seen. Despite Who Love Me, almost every good Bond villain has been also reached. He is way below the standards of Mr. White, which is probably more underrated villain character in that sense, or even General Medrano, which he actually gets you hate that character. Dominic Green doesn't generate an emotional connection to the movie. That's why the movie is relegated to being so forgettable, because the Bond movie lives by the Bond villain, and the Bond villain is forgettable. That's why we shouldn't reward him as being better than mediocre. He's mediocre or even worse than that, as opposed to Camille Montes, which has actually a character that shows depth and actually gets to perform her action scenes, which we don't see that much in the Bond girls.
And time. All right. Once again, just a reminder, anybody watching for the very first time, we will be saving the judging question towards the end. So we are going to be moving on to our second question, which is going to be in the category of Will Smith. And the question is, what Will Smith performance feels the most unique within his entire filmography? We're going to be starting off with Eric. 1 minute when you begin speaking.
I think one of the better characteristics to be known by Will Smith is he plays charismatic characters that get the control of the room every time he gets to play that role, and he doesn't get to play that role in the movie I picked, which is Concussion, where he plays Dr. Benedict Malu, a Nigerian doctor, which it's a rare character that actually gets to be book smart in his category, in his filmography, I say. Like, he gets to play street smarts all the time. He is smarter than people, but in a way different to the rest, as opposed to Dr. Benedict Malu, which is actually book smart, is super prepared, a lot of doctorates and courses and all that. He is also get to play a character that's actually disconnected a bit to humanity. He talks to the dead. He isn't very charismatic in that sense. He gets way overblown, which I can relate. I lose the point many times, and Dr. Benedict Malu gets to do that a lot. Like, he also gets to play a character that wishes to be American in a sense, like in a way, an American dream, but gets disillusioned by it, which actually adds to his performance and makes it unique as opposed to every other character he plays, which is American and charismatic.
The performance of Will Smith that specifically feels the most unique within his filmography is 6 Degrees of Separation. I'll give a brief description for those who haven't seen it. It's Will Smith's first major film role from 1993. He plays a gay con man who infiltrates high society houses in New York City by pretending to be Sidney Poitier's son. That character synopsis alone is the most unique of Will Smith's roles and is 100% backed up by the performance, because this is the only Will Smith performance in which he does not know he's Will Smith yet. From Bad Boys in 1995 and onward, Will Smith is always 100% sure he's the best actor in the room, whether he is or not. And you can see it in every movie. The way he gives and takes with Donald Sutherland, Stockard Channing, and Ian McKellen is different than the way he acts with anyone else from that point on. It is also the only movie in which Will Smith as a lead role is in no way portrayed as the good guy / protagonist.
And time. All right, 5 minutes when the first person begins speaking.
I'll just take a couple pot shots at Erick's opening. Benamalu was American for 10 years by the time the movie takes place, so he's not like wishing he was American. And also, Robert Neville is another character of Will Smith who is book smart and literally talks to the dead. So that's not unique in any facet.
I think American in the sense like, oh, he's an American citizen is kind of unrelated to that. The movie itself, I would agree with the actual real life stuff that you can say, he was American in the real life, but we're not talking about his real life credentials. I think that the character itself many times talks about pretending to be American in a sense, not again pretending like, oh, I'm American because I have to be American, more like American people have to be, American people have a house. I think he actually plays a character that isn't commanding the room, which is actually very surprising for a Will Smith character as opposed to 6 Degrees of Separation, which even in real life he wasn't as accomplished as a character actor. I would say he is more similar to his role in Principal Air, which he's bouncing out. So it's not that unique of a role. I think the gay part of his role is
in his filmography. I'll point out, like, we're talking about his filmography here, not his TV roles, just for what it's worth.
Filmography overall. I know we're talking movies,
just getting out there. But yeah, no, I'll expand on my point about every other Will Smith performance is they all have the same degree of righteousness. He is a morally gray character at times, but he is either that super cool Mike Lowry, Muhammad Ali, Welcome to Earth cool guy, or he's the genuine pursuit of happiness, 7 pounds King Richard drama guy. Speaking of pursuit of happiness, Concussion is not unique as a biopic. Speaking of Ali, Concussion is not unique as a sports biopic. Speaking of King Richard, Concussion is not unique as a sports biopic in which Will Smith plays a divisive figure who is outside of the sport itself, who has a tremendous influence on the sport at the highest level.
Thank you. Like, the last one, sorry, I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, King Richard is so Concussion is not unique as a movie as a biopic in which Will Smith plays a divisive figure who is outside of the sport itself, who has an influence on the sport at the highest level.
I think on paper you can say that about a lot of his roles. Like I think there's a very different role between King Richard and Concussion. Concussion is more of a against a controversial figure, but not necessarily for the same reason. Like the methods that he uses in King Richard are very different to the ones he uses in Concussion. In Concussion, he's relying more on his knowledge and his facts as opposed to his street smart style that he uses in King Richard. He uses in 60 Degrees of Separation. I think 60 Degrees, even if he doesn't play like you wouldn't say he plays a complex character per se. It's more of adding to the other characters. He's not the lead role because he plays like a subservient character, not subservient in the sense like he doesn't add anything, but like he's there to make the white characters. Like I'm not getting into race too much, but to get other characters which is different than any other Will Smith role. It's more unique. There's no other situation in which I mean, he kind of plays a role like that in The Legend of Bagger Vance, which he's not the lead character either, and he's there to prop up Matt Damon. Like that's a character similar to this one in the sense that they are playing not marksmanship roles, but they are supporting the other characters into their goals. He doesn't have an arc per se, which doesn't. And he gets to play. He gets to play a character that is pretending to be something he's not, which he also plays in Hitch, also a charismatic role. He relies on his charisma too much, and Concussion, he doesn't get to do that, which makes it more unique than other roles.
Yeah, no. In Concussion, he gets told he can't take on the NFL, and he wins because he's Will Smith. In King Richard, he gets told he can't get black girls into tennis, and he wins because he's Will Smith. It's the same thing in every single Will Smith movie. I'm not even talking about Concussion alone. Literally, Will Smith versus the only starring role of Will Smith's career in any capacity is 6 Degrees of only starring role in which he does not win at the end is 6 Degrees of Separation. I am going to do them all. 5 times he beats the aliens. 4 times he beats the drug dealers. Twice he and Margot Robbie get away with being criminals. He beats the government. He beats the giant spider. He gets Matt Damon to win at golf. He knocks out George Foreman. He cameos in a Kevin Smith movie. Beats the robots. Beats the sharks. Beats Kevin James's awkwardness. Beats homelessness. Figures out the zombies. Paints the moon. Donates his organs to good people. Beats the NFL. Beats depression. Beats work racism. Gets set free. Will Smith and Will Smith defeat Will Smith. He stops being a pigeon. He beats tennis racism and escapes real racism. Before you talk about how those are just the movies and not the performances, in every single one of those performances, you get Will Smith's victory dance. 6 Degrees of Separation is the one unique role in which he gives and takes and is not just victory dancing at the
end. And time. All right. 1 minute closing. I love the apology. 1 minute closing when Erick begins speaking by himself.
I like a good rap battle. I wish I had prep a rap battle if would ever win. I don't think he wins for the same reasons he wins in other movies. I think he eventually loses. He is forced to move out of his house. He is forced to move out of the city because he gets defeated. And then the truth talks for itself. It's not because he wins because he's Will Smith. He wins because his facts are actually true. And in that sense, he doesn't get to win and celebrate in the same way. In fact, the movie itself it shows us the scene where he gets to maybe pick work in the government and be the actual American, and he doesn't actually choose that. He chooses to he keeps to his he keeps to how to say it. He keeps to himself, like the way that he was already disappointed by the American government. He doesn't get to actually victory dance. Like as opposed to 6 degrees of separation, which is he plays to his charisma every time, and that's more of a, even if it's early and he hasn't become the star that it is, it shows the beginning of that stardom. Which, to be fair, 6 degrees of separation is a good movie, but it's not that different to other movies where he plays a similar role.
I believe I pointed out why 6 degrees of separation is not only more unique than Concussion, but unique over literally every other starring performance, because you do get to see him win in some form or another. Yes, it's different in like 7 pounds and in Concussion than it is in Independence Day or Men in Black. But like I said, he has those 2 lines. He has either the serious drama line, Concussion, serious drama line where it's just Will Smith against the world and he's going to win because he is right, and that is the same as it is in Pursuit of Happiness, as it is in King Richard, be it more morally gray. There are these slight variations on that righteous Will Smith character. The only bad guy Will Smith character has ever played is in 6 Degrees of Separation as a starring role. Obviously not that devil cameo, whatever. The only time where he doesn't win, he goes to jail, he loses, is in 6 Degrees of Separation. Also worth noting, not a huge point, but it is the only time he plays a gay man. So I think that, and we see a different performance because of that.
Time. The last 45 words you just said, strike from the record. All right, moving on into question 3. Now we are going on just the broad category of sports, which is ironic because we just talked about sports kind of a little bit there. But in the category of sports, this is a fun one. And for those marking at home, might see it again later. So let's see how this compares. What sports film best represents its sport? All right, so 1 minute Tato after he takes a little sip, and then you begin speaking.
The film that best represents its sport is 1992's White Men Can't Jump. While this may seem like an unconventional choice, it's a better pick than a biopic or even a fictionalized version of a professional sport, because street basketball or the local pickup game is likely the highest level of basketball anyone who's ever had any interest in the game has played. It's played all around the world, and even if you haven't personally played yourself, you've probably driven by a court and seen it happening. I could literally walk a mile or two in either direction, this way or this way, take out my phone, film a scene that could be from White Men Can't Jump. That's how real of a representation is. There's several nerdy white dudes like Tristan Jass and the Professor who make their livings from basketball hustling, sometimes literally at the Venice beach courts where White Men Can't Jump takes place. White Men Can't Jump is so realistic that while they're filming the scene between Woody and Wesley, whether Woody or not could dunk, Woody and Wesley were literally betting amongst each other whether Woody could dunk or not.
I think when you want to represent the sport, you want to pick the very best director, the very best story to pick that sport, and that's why I pick Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull from 1980. I think it's a very dramatic. I know it's a biopic, but that doesn't make it any less for it. Like, if anything, it gives it a bigger stand in it, because it's the real story of a real character, a person who actually participated in the movie. And he actually gets to show himself as a flawed character in the world of sports. The visual aspect of Raging Bull is unmatched in boxing movies, especially. It's the one boxing movie where you get to actually experience to be in the boxing match. You get the sweat, and it's the first one to actually use that boxing as inside the story. That you get the blood and the sweat, and your knees weak, arms are heavy. I won't go any further into Lose Yourself, but like, the way it's visually represented is better than any other boxing movie and better than most sports movies in itself.
Time. I'm so mad it took me fucking 4 debates and a half to realize that maybe I should add the answers at the bottom of the ticker with the question. It's just so more visually appealing. Jesus Christ. That's why I change formats all the time. I always just come up with better ideas. It just takes a while to get there sometimes. 5 minutes when the first person begins speaking.
Like you said, Raging Bull is the story of Jake LaMotta's life. It's not about boxing. The conflicts are based on his family drama and his mental shit and the mafia. Therefore, it doesn't actually represent boxing as a whole. There are 18 minutes of boxing in Raging Bull's 2-hour runtime, and that includes training, locker rooms, walkouts, and post fights. The longest boxing scene in Raging Bull is less than 4 minutes long. There are 19 minutes of basketball in the first 30 minutes of White Man Can't Jump. Basketball is like just under half of White Man Can't Jump's runtime. Boxing, like 1/6 of Raging Bull's runtime. You take the boxing out of Raging Bull and have a practically good story about a dude spiraling into chaos with the mafia and shit.
Actually, the boxing itself is a very big part of the movie. That the boxing is interconnected with the dramatic story. Like, for example, when he gets super jealous of her wife's affairs and all that, he and when she mentions like this character is actually this boxer is really pretty. What does he do to that boxer? He punches the shit out of him and makes him ugly, and that's in itself very connected to the story. Like, you cannot take boxing out of Jake LaMotta's life because that was his life. You cannot take any other combat sport and change it for that. It's very connected to boxing in the highest level that possible at that time, in between the 40s and 50s. I was actually thinking of a very similar thing with White Man Can Jump. Maybe you can take a lot of the movie and there's a lot of basket, but it's not the most visually appealing way to look at basket. And even that, the emotional stuff in White Man Can Jump doesn't actually connect to the basketball itself. It's more about hustling and all that, and the connection between those two characters. You can use whatever other sport between that and have the same story with the Jeopardy and all that. I really like that part, by the way. As opposed to Raging Bull, which the violence in the life of Jake LaMotta is very well connected to the boxing. Like, to make it a point about being in real life doesn't diminish the fact that he was a boxer and boxing was his life until a point where he started to lose. Like, and I think White Man Can Jump, if a good movie, like, doesn't actually need basket to work at all.
Yeah, but that's not really what the point. The discussion here is it's still what film represents the sport, and you only have 18 minutes of representation, whereas I have over half an hour of representation. Yours is also a super limited representation of one guy's life that is also inaccurate. In that, like, he said, Jake LaMotta himself said he didn't like the movie. His wife said, Vicky LaMotta said he was way worse. So even that part is inaccurate, but I don't want to get too caught up in the non-sports film. As far as the accuracy of the sport being represented in those 18 minutes, you get an inaccurate portrayal of Jake LaMotta's boxing. He would never eat 10 punches to the face clean in a row, both stylistically and if that happened in a real fight, the ref would just stop it and call it TKO. That's not my opinion. That is pro boxer Gabriel Rosado breaking down Raging Bull. He never walked over to Ray's corner and said, "You never knocked me down," because that's not, you can't do that in boxing either. The level of eye damage he's allowed to fight with is unrealistic. There's a bevy of Scorsese stylization that makes the boxing unrealistic. There's no Tarantino cum shots of blood hitting the announcers in the faces. That's unrealistic. It's just, the boxing in it is not very realistic at all, actually.
I don't think it has to be realistic.
It looks cool. It's nice, but it is a
you're
bad representation of boxing.
You're going
Street
for the feel of
basketball,
boxing.
the way they gamble and hustle is a completely accurate and good representation of basketball, to the point where people are still doing it now. The Venice beach courts are still totally legendary.
Yeah. It's not connected that much to the story itself. Like, yeah, it might be more realistic to see, but it's not that appealing to see. Why would you settle for a basketball movie where you're limited to the streets? You will go for a basketball movie that actually shows the biggest possible basketball you can take. Raging Bull actually does that, and even if it's not realistic in that sense, you're going for the feel of the movie. That's why movies are for. And if we would have picked a documentary to portray the most realistic basketball, we will pick Hoop Dreams, which I didn't want to take because I didn't want to talk basketball and basketball, but too easy. Like, we're not going for realism. We're going for the field of boxing, and we are sticking to the blood and also the visual representation of boxing in this movie has translated to every other boxing movie from there to here. Like, the way the camera falls alongside the opponent when he gets knocked down, the way the magnitude of the Sugar Ray Robinson in that movie gets to he gets to be prepared before he gets to his punches. The way like, yeah, I know the blood doesn't get to that in that sense, but we're not looking for realism. We're looking for the best representation in film, which film is a fictional medium. You're not looking for realism, and you can go ahead and then pick apart the Raging Bull inaccuracies. That's not what a movie's for. We're not looking at documentary. We're looking at fiction.
I disagree. I think we're talking about what film best represents the sport.
All right. 1 minute. Tato begins speaking.
Raging Bull is an underdog story. The reason an underdog story isn't a good representation of the sport was because if the underdog story were the most accurate representation, it would cease to be the underdog story. That's just not how that goes. I think the life imitating art aspect of White Man Can't Jump is better. I believe that biopics are kind of a dime a dozen. The whole part about Jake LaMotta's life was not accurate because it's a he said, she said. So that part's not accurate. There's only 18 minutes of the sport that it represents, and it is a very limited 18-minute. It's a very limited representation. It speed runs his life. It's just not a good box. And the reason I didn't put a boxing movie at all is because you're right that boxing movies don't represent boxing the best. White Men Can't Jump 100% represents what street ball is. It is hustling. It is gambling. The real events between the movie.
Well, I think we went for very different approaches to representing. Representing, it's more, at the very least to me, like what movie symbolizes the way this sport is represented. I think White Man Can Jump, if it's a good movie, doesn't make the most visually appealing representation of that sport, which doesn't make it appealing to me as a viewer, as somebody who doesn't actually bought the basketball to get into the movie. Like the movie itself doesn't take that seriously, basketball as a sport itself. Like the way the final game against the King and the Duck is shot is very repetitive and all that. Like the way he even gets to do his jump, and we don't get the catharsis of doing that for the very first time, as opposed to with Raging Bull, which isn't actually an underdog story. It's more of a story of self-punishment and trying to not make the best of the situation, but actually screwing up your situation. Boxing should be represented in the more cathartic way, in the more bloody, and in the way you get the sweat, in the way you get the punches. The editing in this movie is particularly excellent, like the way the punches are hit and the sound and all that. Yeah, you even get I get lost in that
one. Me too, buddy. Me too.
All right.
I'm getting thirsty also. Can I get like 30 seconds to get some water?
Yeah, good. All right. He already knows the question, so we're going into it. All right. Eric will be starting, so obviously we got to wait on him anyway. But the next question is going to be in the category of Oscars. I'm pretty sure. And honestly, I don't remember because the way this question is, I think that's what it is. But for those at home, what, or maybe directors, Oscars, I don't know. What is the worst film from an Oscar-winning director? The director have had to won Best Director, and then what is the worst film within their filmography? So that is going to be the debate. Yeah, see this is how you know a structure is going good in terms of formatting when he can take a break and overall the time's not even going to be noticed. Unfortunately, this isn't
37 action.
Exactly. Unfortunately, this isn't pre-recorded because John Marr just taught me how to pause ones of pre-recordings, which I did not know was a thing. So shout out John Marr. All right, Eric, your lips nice and good.
Don't talk about my lips.
You don't know what I'm doing when I'm camming off. All right, 1 minute when you begin, buddy.
Yep. Can you put the question there just to more visually representize my stuff, just to have it better? Thank you very much. So yeah, I took a big gamble picking a movie I hadn't watched before I picked it, and that's more on reputation alone. I picked Cats, directed by Tom Hooper, the director that won for the King's Speech. You have no idea what you're getting into when you're looking at Cats. It's not a so bad it's good movie. It's an exhausting, visually disgusting movie. Like, yeah, it has no plot, has no actual good music, has worse jokes. Whatever break you get from the songs, it's terrible cat puns, which don't work at all with the cast. I think when you're looking at the movie that Tato's going to pick, you will see that Cats is a better representation for communism because everybody's acting skills are equally distributed. They are equally bad. Actors like Ian McKellen are meant to be as bad as Rebel Wilson, as James Corden, as Jason Derulo. Idris Elba, the sexiest man alive today, gets to look horrible. It's Roll McCavity. Everybody's acting. Everybody's taking it seriously, which makes it worse because it doesn't work at all in this movie. Like it's a punchline for a reason. Cats is the very first answer you get when you pick this question.
The worst film from an Oscar-winning director is Mission to Moscow. Now, I know what you're thinking. The 7th Police Academy movie had an Oscar-winning director? No. I'm referring to 1943's pro-Stalin propaganda film directed by Michael Curtiz the year after Casablanca. The movie is about Joseph Davies, the second U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union. By the producer's own admission, the film was an expedient lie for political purposes, glossily covering up important facts with full or partial knowledge of their false presentation. The film was panned by both the left and right sides of the political spectrum, if you can imagine them agreeing on anything. Though I will say there was a somewhat positive review from a New York Times critic that praised the film's believable attempt to rehabilitate Stalin. This reviewer was also later quoted as saying, "Man, that Hitler guy from Jojo Rabbit is pretty cool. There are zero redeeming qualities to this film, period."
All right, it's gonna get weird. All right, 5 minutes when the first person begins speaking.
Go ahead, tell me why your little musical is worse than Stalinist propaganda.
I mean, first of all, like you will have taken in the context of the movie. Like the movie wasn't made for Russians to pick Stalin. That was meant to, as the time of the were allies at the time. Like they didn't know better. Like they were trying to reinforce the USSR and USA relationship, and that how long that lasted 3 years. That's the 3 years of impact that movie had, because after that, the USA and Russia didn't have any good relationship at all, which would make the very worst part of the Euro movie like irrelevant. Like it doesn't matter. Nobody talks about it. Like let's talk about the people agreeing for a fact. In this time, in this day of and age, like you don't get to agree when a movie is actually bad. There's people defending out there, Madame Web. There's nobody defending Cats. You look at the numbers. It has a 1.3 in Letterboxd as opposed to the Your movie, which has a 2.0, which, to be fair, a lot less people have seen. But there's also the fact that when you make a movie, you make it for either a purpose or another. Like Your movie, at the very least, gets to educate a little bit about the Stalinist Russia.
No, it's a lie. It's a propaganda movie. It doesn't educate. That's the opposite of what a propaganda movie does.
No, propaganda is not meant to educate in that way. It's to make you appeal for that movie. Like it might have made somebody communist between those 3 years that actually mattered, but it didn't matter that much. USA was way against that type of thing. It's much more worse to try to attempt to make a movie that's actually entertaining and failed miserably. Like there's nothing redeeming about Cats. Like I understand, like we're looking at actual real life stuff against entertainment stuff, but the worst film is the one that attempts to do something and fails, and Cats fails much more than Mission to Moscow fails.
Okay, as far as redeeming qualities of Cats, Idris Elba is good. He is not actually capable of being bad. So is Ian McKellen. Jennifer Hudson's memory is great. The sets are actually fantastic in terms of recreating the theater environment. The lighting is fine. You said it yourself. Idris is the sexiest man alive. They made him look ugly. That is a fantastic makeup job, sir.
I don't think they're trying to make him ugly that much. He's more villainous.
Yeah, Mr. McCavity is meant to be an ugly character. I'll drop a quick personal backstory. I was in high school in choir. I ended up going to see Cats at the Chanhassen Theater. It was pretty much what was presented to me. Cats is just a batshit insane story. What Cats is actually a loyal adaptation. For all the things that are wrong with Cats, none of it's that it is not loyal to the play. Cats is bad because Cats as a story is fucking ridiculous and shit. But all the actors are relatively doing their job. There's no good acting. There's no good lighting, cinematography. Like looking at the movies themselves, even if you want to take away all the bullshit, which I don't think you can. Looking at the movies themselves, the Cats is still better because it has some degree of redeeming qualities and stuff.
I would disagree with those redeeming qualities. That, you know why Memory works as a song? It's because it doesn't have anything to do with the plot. You can hear Memory outside the movie, and that was also not something that the movie itself brought. It was something that came along with the package. I never said it was an unfaithful adaptation. It's bad because the actual play is bad, but the attempt to bring it to the film medium was actually worse. Like you have that good light and the good stage. It doesn't work at all if the directing is as poor as in it. Like you have these great stages and the big dancing and all that. The way it's framed, like have you seen Les Mis? In Les Mis, everything is in close up, and in Les Mis kind of works because the acting is that good. In Cats, everything is in close up, and everything you have worked for to make the dance and the stage and the lighting good, it gets ruined by the way it's framed. Like it's both an artistic reverence and also like very boring to watch. Like I understand like Mission to Moscow is a propaganda film, but that's what it's attempting to do. It's not trying to entertain you, which that doesn't attempt to do. It's a propaganda. It's trying to tell you about something. And even if you look at the facts, like he hasn't. Tom Hooper hasn't done anything since Cats. It's been 5 years. Francisca Hayward, the character who debuted in that film, hasn't done anything. 20 years of career Michael Curtis had after doing Mission to Moscow. It's not as a big.
None of that's relevant to the. Yeah, you're going off on a tangent because the worst movie, the worst movie of these movies, is still like the propaganda film is still worse than the bad musical, no matter which way you cut it.
But movies are also made to be
let's talk about some things that happen.
Sorry.
No, let me confirm a minute. Movie opens on the real Joseph Davies and cuts to fucking Morticia Adams' grandpa playing Joseph Davies, addressing the camera, and then the movie actually starts, and it's a lies of fucking garbage. The level of Tato lore that they treat the Japanese with, they literally hit a gong and play the fucking stereotypical music anytime a Japanese character.
They do that in every 80s movie.
They're wearing the fucking Tojo glasses. Fucking FDR is Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget.
And time. Right. 1 minute closings when Erick begins to speak.
It's very important to look at the historical context of Mission to Moscow. It was made to reinforce that relationship in the two years it had left to do. Michael Curtis went on to direct many movies. Like, if you want to talk about redeeming qualities, Mission to Moscow was actually nominated for an Oscar in Best Art Direction. Like, it wasn't that pan at the time. It is not that pan at all in this time. It's more look as a historical context movie. Like, you have to look. I understand propaganda has a bad rep, but film was also made for propaganda, and that doesn't make it a worse movie. Also, Michael Curtis has a way worse movie in the Santa Fe Trail, which actually tries to give a point to the pro-slavery camp in the Civil War, which is way worse than whatever they do in Mission to Moscow, which doesn't work that much as a Stalinistic propaganda. It doesn't have that much. Cats is just that bad looking. It's a presence of the hubris that somebody has to bring Cats to film, and I'm the one to do it. Tom Hooper never went on to recover from that. He went on to direct commercials. He hasn't done anything from work since then. Same for Francisca Hayward, and that's it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that doesn't matter, but I didn't get to talk about my movie a lot. They send this idiot to Soviet Russia, and he's like, I'm not going to get duped. Proceeds to instantly get duped like Franco in the interview. Dude gets off the train, and he's like, I'm hungry. They bring him food. He's like, well, there's no famine here, except this isn't a comedy in which Randall Park gets blown up while Katy Perry plays. This is actually presented as reality. There's a scene in the embassy. He's like, oh, they can bug me if they want. It's crazy. They depict the Moscow show trials as one trial. What really happened was a dude shot another dude. Stalin was like, oh, there's no way that was one dude. He rounded up a bunch of people and tortured them into confessing and killed them. That is fucking terrible. It is way worse than Cats can possibly be. The tragedy aside, acting shit, pacing garbage. Cats just is a bad musical. There's no way in which it is worse than fucking this. Even Franco eventually realized Kim Jong-un is Kim Jong-un. This dude never realized Joe Stalin is Joe Stalin. It went on for way too long. It's bullshit.
And time. All right. Our main prepared debates have been completed. Behind the scenes, judges, if you can give me a thumbs up when you're ready, as I put together just my notes, just in terms of how it's going. So just a reminder, something that we've officially established, like it was kind of like, an unwritten thing before, but what we officially established. So what we do is we judge these based on overall votes, but in the sense of a tiebreaker will go to whoever's won more rounds, because if that's the case, and if it does go to, or it'll go to the speed round. So those are the two options for a tie. Either if someone's won 3-1 or somehow 4-0, which we did the math, I don't think it's likely. So if it's a tie, it's either 2-2 or like it's a split, or it's a 60-40 essentially. So we'll definitely look at that. But with that said, judges look like they're ready behind the scenes.
Good knock, Erick.
All right. I'll start. I'll always start just to be completely impartial. I will let Chad go last, and then John. So all right, here's what we got. Here's my notes.
Hi, Carrie. Over there.
Yes, and then Carrie is the unofficial fourth judge, tiebreaker, in case we all agree Chad's stupid. All right, so the first question, I'll actually put it in the bottom. That was the Bond question. This one was interesting because obviously anytime we do underrated, you kind of want to see how each player is going to establish what they consider underrated, then just kind of go back and forth. They do semantics, blah, 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 blah. I think both of you guys did a good job of kind of touching on why you think your person's underrated. I will say that Tato kind of got a little, into the sense of like, hey, she's overrated, and kind of was focusing on that. And I think that just took away from his ability to just prop up his person. And then maybe the lack of just overall Bond knowledge or whatever, maybe that just came into play. But you could just tell that Erick, really knows his Bond stuff. So even if he was bullshitting a little bit, it just felt more that he was able to like make sense of why. One of his final lines was, at the end of the day, Bond villains is the most important thing. So even if his is a mediocre Bond villain, that's still worse versus Bond girl. Overall, it's not as important. So that kind of was a good closing point. So my point one is going to go to Erick. Second question, we're talking Will Smith, and it was exactly it was honestly the exact opposite. Tato just went ham on just Will Smith knowledge, and it's just unfortunate for Erick. If you follow Tato on Letterboxd, or just know what he's doing, he's just gone on a MCU level a run of Will Smith movies recently, so he was able to just spit things out of his mouth. I was actually shocked that Erick didn't once bring up the accent. Maybe he was afraid that it kind of would have got, bogged down too much of the accent and would have just lost a little bit of weight of what he was really trying to go on, but not even bring up the accent at all. Definitely hurt him of just him standing out.
For what it's worth, I had the counter left locked up for that.
Well, relax. All right. You don't have time.
Yeah,
to
figure.
But just to continue, Tato was able to knock him on just all the dramas and sports stuff. It all ends up kind of blending into ones, and then hip hooray on Will Smith. I would say that Erick, if you would have been able to hit Tato with and all that stuff you're saying about Will Smith of not being Will Smith yet, you could say that about any actor. Leo with his screaming, Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark, like Brad Pitt of just the charisma. Like you could say that about any actor in the early roles, and maybe that would have hit harder. But since we didn't hear that from you, it didn't really balance it out. So essentially, Tato ran away with that for me. Then in the third question, I was not expecting this to go how it went in terms of just approaches. Erick, you debated essentially what was the better movie, and Tato, you talked about street ball instead of just basketball, and I don't think Erick was prepared for that. So I'm just going to get that out of the way. Tato got this one for me, just the ability to just talk about the representation of street ball and not basketball, and Erick not really having a counter for that, in terms of just maybe his lack of knowledge on street ball or maybe lack of knowledge of basketball in general to compare the two. It just didn't really work. And all just the over the top, cinematic stuff we get from boxing doesn't well represent the actual sport of boxing. And Erick, you tried your best to go like, yeah, but cinema is cinema. So it's meant to be fictionalized. But at the end of the day, this is the question. So unfortunately, that's what we're looking for there. And I didn't do the thing at the bottom. And the final one, I will start off by saying that, you guys only talked about the movies for like 99%, which I get it. That's the question. But since the question is also talked about the filmography, I did, at least me as the writer, I wanted to see the separation of their overall filmography and why that one was the worst, or at least the one that they won for to kind of compare to at least get something. Since you guys were just going to talk negatively about movies at the end of the day, you guys went on the semantic things. Mine's worse. Mine's propaganda. Mine's just bad. Like I just kind of figured that's how it would go without the comparisons of the movies. But with that said, Tato did a good job of almost coming back of like, hey, but everything you're talking about cats with the lighting and the props and, making Idris Elba like ugly, like that's all good work. But at the end of the day, Erick just did a really good job of telling me of why his movie's worse. And even though Tato tried to shut him down saying like, you're not talking about the film, but Erick at least got a little bit in there. He's like, Tom Hooper hasn't worked since that. And it's been 5 years. So that's like a knock on his career. He's doing commercials. So that did work for me as a judge. Maybe Tato didn't go with it with that approach. But yeah, so for me, I'm going 2-2. Erick, Tato, Erick, Tato. All right. John.
Erick, Tato, Erick.
Yeah.
Erick, Tato, Erick.
Yes, I'm writing it down, but yes,
It's exactly the way I voted, Henry. It's fucking ridiculous you have the same vote. But I'll go over it. The Bond character debate kind of got bogged down by like just semantics because like I would say like Tato probably had it in hand, but then he kept saying yeah, they're underrated, but they're overshadowed, and then there's multiple villains, and this guy does better than this, and then Erick caught on to that and is like, yeah, there are 3 villains, and he's the worst of the 3 villains, and so on and so forth. And then, but when it was buried under all those layers, like I didn't even know how Tato felt about that character in the movie at the end of all of it, because so many words that contradict themselves were thrown out there. And meanwhile, while that was happening, Erick just calmly dragged Olga Kurylenko along And Henry's also right. The knowledge shown through, which brings me to my next point for question number 2. Tato just showed up with a prepared speech, and Erick let him talk. Like the fact that you let Tato talk for like 3 unadulterated minutes, so polite, but that like he just buried.
That's on the judge.
Yeah, I had to create. I didn't have this created because I thought you guys were nice, and then I was like, nope, I got to make
Burns
this.
Was debating. Like he was talking so much, I thought it was Jay Burns in this match, but it was not.
It's not a compliment. Not a compliment.
Tato's prepared speeches in round 2 and round 3, where he comes in, where he goes through Will Smith's entire filmography, and Erick just listens to him. I'm like, holy shit! Like I wrote Tato. Like I was impressed. There was no coming back. Same thing. Also, Tato saying Quentin Tarantino "cum shot of blood" is an automatic win for round 3. I won't even go into it. No coming back from that. And then in round 4, I have to agree 100% with Henry. Like the 2 things: the overall letterboxed ratings of the aggregate of people rating Mission to Moscow is a better movie. 1, and Tom Hooper is missing in action 2. So I go Erick, Tato, Erick as well.
All right. And Chad/Carrie. Let's see if you guys fight for who's actually the judge here or whatever. Go ahead, Chad.
Okay, so this is going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, because I do agree. I think it was very even. And I'll just say off the bat, I did have Tato twice and Erick twice. So let's see what configuration I had them in. The very first question, I went with Tato, and I said because he argued for underrated better and mentioned his choices middle of the road, while Erick's is lauded with awards and stuff like that. And I don't feel like Erick kind of came back to argue that Tato's choice is worse than just middle of the road that effectively. And then in 2, I agree that Tato kind of just came with the Will Smith knowledge. And his character just seemed very unique. Because I know it was like performance, but it's hard to sometimes take character out of performance and vice versa. So, it's like who is the most unique character is also Will Smith, performing that character, kind of differently than he normally would. And Tato just had so much information there. So I went Tato there. And then, so the last 2, I actually had Erick, if you did the math. Question 3, I was actually on the fence with this one. But what the reason why, I don't know. I think Erick's point when he talked about Tato was going off about how, this is so accurately portraying street ball. But then Erick was like, well, that's not showing everything about basketball, because basketball, you also play in big arenas and stuff like that. And it doesn't really show that side of it. Whereas Raging Bull, kind of shows a lot of that. And you can't really take that out of it, even though it is kind of more of a biopic. And, that's why I was on the fence, because, Tato had some good points too about there's not as much boxing in it as there's basketball and White Men Can't Jump. So, I was very on the fence, but I leaned Erick just because I think he had some good points that I just wasn't expecting. And then same thing here, because I've seen this before, where it's the one where you come out with something that's like a super racist movie or something that you're like, this is a slam dunk because, it's racist or it's propaganda and it's, obviously shouldn't be shown or whatever. And then, someone else has some good points. And I think Erick, just came out of the gate just really hard with a lot of points. It was like, it's exhausting. It's disgusting. There's no good music, no plot. And then he brought up the communism first or whatever. And then I figured out why he brought up communism. And then he talked about how it's a punchline and that everybody kind of hates it. And the defense for Tato's thing, I mean, it's hard to defend because Tato did a good job at tearing his down as well. But the couple points I liked from Erick was that he said it's educational, and I know Tato tried to say well, I mean, it doesn't teach you anything, but then it's well, it kind of teaches you about propaganda. So, you can look at it as kind of it's not a satire in itself, but you can kind of view it from that lens. and see like how they used to do propaganda and stuff like that. I think that's where Eric was going for, so that's how I had it in my mind. And then also Eric like snuck something in like towards the end there with well, he said Tato's film was nominated for an Oscar, which doesn't hold that much weight, but then he said that Curtiz has an even worse film, you know, with I forget what film he said, but he said it had like to do with slavery and stuff like that. I don't know how accurate that is, but it counted because
It's true.
Okay,
I'm
so it's not,
I think.
yeah, that was about it. So I was split. I don't know how that adds up. Let's see.
I have the math. All right. So with that said, I'll just do a 1-by-1 beat on just how it goes. So round 1, it goes Eric, Tato, point Eric. Round 2, Tato, point Tato. Round 3, Eric, point Eric. Round 4, Tato, Eric, point
You have 3 and
Tato.
4 mixed up.
No, yeah, it's the other way. Yeah, the fourth one is the one I got all 3, and the Raging Bull he won 2-1.
Okay. But the winner's still the winner, right? Yeah, the winner's still the winner.
We both have
I think
we both have a 3-0 and a 2-1. It's a straight tie,
okay.
isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a tie.
that's what I was getting. That's what I was getting at. So you guys, yeah. So I'm just like,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. But yes, 2-2. So we are going to a speed round. All right. So
I need water.
Yeah. And I'm just going to give an overall. You guys can hear me. I'm going to give you an overall. Judge, I'm going to put you in the back, but I'll bring you up when we're going to judging. We're not going to do any deliberation when we get it. We're just going to go to the votes. So take you into the back. So here's how speed round is going to go. What we're going to get is a prompt, which is going to be 2 entities, movies, genres, actors, directors, franchises, et cetera, et cetera. 2 of those. The question is already predetermined, but you're not going to know that until you make your choice. The person that spits theirs out first is going to close, because once again, closing is the rewarding thing, not opening. Why? I don't understand why that hasn't caught on yet in debates. And it's going to be what did I say? 45 seconds. I've only done one of these, so you know me, I don't mind switching it up. So 45 seconds. 30 seconds, 15. Let's just do that. So I think this is pretty good. So we're going to go back and forth. So you're going to start with 30, 15. That's what, there, final answer. It's in stone. So 30, 30, 15. And then we're going to have that. So gentlemen, are you ready? Tato, you're able to hear me, right? I assumed, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm going to say two entities. Whoever says it's one or the other, so it's not, it's between the 2. So wait until you hear both, but spit it out as quick as you can. And then my judge in the background kind of listen just to make sure if I'm like, I don't know for sure, have my back. And then whoever spits theirs gets theirs first, they're going to go second. So they'll close. And then we're going to do 30, 30, 15. So gentlemen, are you ready?
Yep.
All right. Your 2 options are Star Wars, MCU.
MCU.
All right. And then Star Wars. So we're going to start with Eric. He'll get his first 30. And your question is, which franchise has the lower lows within its universe? Minimum 2 movies. So, because I know you don't have much time, so I'm not trying to, jumble up your mouth, but at least have 2 movies that you want to discuss. If you guys need a couple seconds just to make sure you know which one you're going, we will start in about 30 seconds. So if you need, there's not too many to think of, but if you just want to.
So just to clarify, so we picked 2 movies as the worst of the worst. Okay.
But so essentially, which your two movies is worse than theirs, and you're defending the other 2 in a sense. And if you have more, that's fine, but I just need a bare minimum of 2. That was kind of my point. But if it's worse, that's worse, because the question is lower lows. But I just want at least 2. I'm not trying to put the pressure on you because I know there's not much time. So judges, keep that in mind. So if they have more, if they have
maybe a dumb question, but we are agreeing for like the Cats one, like we are arguing ours is worse, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to be sure.
Okay. Let me get my timer ready. I'm going to stay on screen just to make sure I'm paying attention. All right. Eric, are you ready?
I'm starting this one, right?
Yeah, and I'll start the timer, and then I'm going to just essentially give you a 5 count. So just kind of, or I'll just, whatever. So you ready? Start when you're ready.
Go. So I will argue that there's two very different wars between the Star Wars franchise. I think there's the Phantom Menace wars, which is super boring, ugly CGI, like super that. And then the Rise of Skywalker wars, which is the corporate wars, which is a super cowardly move to scrap up all your trilogy for a terrible movie and try to make it so that you like make everybody happy and fail miserably at that. The Cats actually helped Star Wars in that regard because everybody was focused on how bad Cats was.
Time.
At the time. Yeah, sorry.
Time.
Hey.
I know, 30 seconds, quick. That's why it's called speedrun. All right, when you begin speaking, Tato.
Yeah, I think the bottom of the barrel of the MCU is way worse than the bottom of the barrel of Star Wars. That's what happens when you're pushing out 2-3 movies a year as opposed to one movie every 2-3 years. Thor: Dark World, Eternals, Incredible Hulk, I think are all worse than those bottom of the barrel MCU or Star Wars movies because they just had less time to have love and care put into them, and they're a bigger stain on what is the bigger legacy, bigger franchise, just like financially for what it's worth.
All right, another 30 seconds. Eric, when you begin.
Okay. You just hear the words, the prequels and the sequels with Star Wars, and you know what you're talking about the worst things about both franchises. I think the worst part of the worst of the worst in the MCU is just mediocre at best, or even like trying to do something. Eternals is trying to do something. Thor is mediocre at best. Phantom Menace is just a miserable experience with a lot of cartoonish racist stereotypes. Rise of Skywalker is a cowardly movie that goes back to the stuff that was working for the previous two, and that kind of stuff is more damaging than mediocre movies in the MCU.
And time. Tato, 30 seconds when you begin.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think most people consider the worst of the trilogy, the prequel trilogy, Attack of the Clones, and I think most people shit on Last Jedi more than Rise of Skywalker in general, except for Jay Burns, who is the other which way around. And you honestly didn't even talk about the worst Star Wars movie, which is the Clone Wars movie, the animated one. So I don't think you have even close to the bottom of the Star Wars in your list anyway. I definitely have the bottom of the MCU.
And time. All right, last 15 seconds. Go about it however you want. 15 seconds when you begin, Eric.
Thank you for reminding me that I'm not limited to talking about those two movies. I just as a kind of thing. Like Attack of the Clones is much worse. The Star Wars: The Clone Wars is much worse than any MCU movie that you have. Like I think it has worse CGI, worse characters, worse dialogue. Star Wars is damaged brand. MCU is still coming up.
And last 15 seconds, Tato.
Star Wars is no more damaged than MCU. We're still having Star Wars projects announced, done. We're literally like in the middle of the Acolyte, or it just ended, something like that. It's not a damaged brand. Neither of them are damaged brands. No movie has been more offensive, like financially offensive than those other ones.
All right. Judges, bringing you on. All right. We're going to go in opposite order now this time, just to kind of mix up, be fair. So, Chad, I'll give you 30 seconds or less if you want to kind of, talk yourself through it, but write your name down on your board, by the way. And then, so write your name first and then talk. And then, but once again, about 30 seconds. I'll cut you off. I'm not afraid to do it. Chad, go.
Yeah, this was tough. I felt like this I felt like this question was a little confusing in a way. But I feel like they did their best to argue it. I went with Erick on this, and reason being is because I feel like they were both hitting some movies that they thought were really bad. But then I feel like Erick made a point about how kind of like the worst with the MCU a lot of the times is just mediocre. Like it's never really that bad. And I feel like Erick hit a lot more like negatives in his movies, and talking about like the cowardly moves of, Rise of Skywalker and things like that. And I feel like Tato kind of helped by pointing out more bad movies that are in the Star Wars.
All right. That's one void for Erick and John.
Yeah, you get like 75 total seconds in this round, and that just sucks, especially when you're talking about like the entirety of the MCU and the entirety of the Star Wars franchises. But when you spend 20% of the time giving your opponents more point to throw back in your face, I have to vote for Erick.
All right. And yeah, unfortunately, Tato, I love you, but you just, I guess you did. I don't know if you forgot that he has another 15 seconds or if you just for some reason thought that maybe it would help. It's unfortunate, but sometimes the pressure of the speed round, that's might how it goes. But with that said, and your winner is going to be, damn it. There he is. Erick Moreno. All right. Erick, how do you feel?
He was right at the beginning. Before we went live, like his picks in the main portion of the debate were actually pretty good. That the very least, White Man Can Jump and the Will Smith one. Like I was going to pick 6 Degrees of Separation if I had picked first in that one, but he did, and it was much easier task to say how that. And he schooled me on that. I would agree totally. He 3 points overall against me. But that's why I had to pick stuff like Bond. Like I know my Bond pretty well. I know Tato hasn't seen that many of Bond movies, so I had to do that against him. Then the sports one, the movie, I knew was going to be different approaches to it. I would agree. I don't know that much about basketball, so that's why I went with the cinematic stuff. Like I was telling you through that I think the better representation is that way. But White Man Can Jump, there's not many competition to have in basketball. Like He Got Game and all that, and it will be a hard one to debate against. And then I remember Dan Murrell versus Kevin Smith, like Birth of a Nation against Jaws, the Revenge, and he was going for something like that for Mission to Moscow. I happened to do some research in Michael Curtis, like the very least he got that, but I was pretty close as well. So major props to Tato and the speed round. Like I would have picked MCU without hearing the question first, so I'm kind of glad it went that way. The worst, yeah, it's much easier to debate against the worst of Star Wars. Like I would have a hard time agreeing for the movies in the MCU. I think some of the series are worse than the movies, but that's a different conversation.
And last question, just overall in terms of just your experience now, do you feel like you're going to continue building on this, or is this one of those things that, as always, just depending on the questions, how they roll, and just also the judges, kind of just a random crapshoot, or do you think that you're going to kind of keep building on this and experiences? You might actually be good at this.
I mean, I would try to build on this. Like I don't think I'm going to stay the same. I never in anything. I don't try to stay the same in trivia, same in debate. Like I will have to work hard to play against other more aggressive players. Like that's why I'm not let that to interrupt that one. Like I was super, like I knew Tato had the advantage of me on Will Smith knowledge, so I'll let him do this and probably hope that the judges don't get as impressed as I am watching him recite that. And then sports, I'm always going to have a hard time talking about reality in sports, so I will have to check some more sports movies. Like I really wanted to check some of the other basketball movies just to have something to go against him. Like thankfully, it didn't work out that way to him bringing up Creed or Rocky, something like that, which I had prepped for, but he didn't bring it up, so it didn't come up. But I will do whatever I do to get better. And give a better show as well. Like at the very least, now I brought notes, which kind of streamlined my thoughts a little bit better than last match, which I started super bad. I don't know how I won that one, but it is what it is.
There you go. Well, you're 2-0, so I'm definitely excited to see what it goes. I'm 2-1, so we'll see if maybe you'll be debating me, and then I'm aggressive, so maybe you get your wish. Let's go over to Tato. Tato, as always, you as a guy who's really good at this now. Losing sucks no matter what. I guess the first question I'll have is that speed round. I can see it in your eyes. You were like, yeah, that matches. Like I could just tell you're not mad at that argument. Do you feel like you regret that decision, or do you feel like it was a shot and it just didn't pay off the way like initially in your mind?
No, I'm just not great at the speed round, having never done it and shit. I genuinely think the lowest lows of the MCU are lower than the lowest lows of Star Wars as an MCU guy. I've constantly made the claim that there's like not a bad Star Wars movie. Train 1 second.
Okay, I'll just add you another question. So just overall, now you're 1-1, so obviously, you're in a good position to still play, quality players. Do you feel like your experience is continuing to build, and you're just excited to, redeem yourself? Similar to me, anytime I lose, I just want to take it out. I just want to start beating the shit out of somebody the next match, or is it one of those where it's like, just at the end of the day, you love debate, just let the balls roll?
yeah, I don't know. Before this, even I was thinking maybe I might take a little pause. Not like I'm stepping away from the league forever or anything, but it just might be a second before I take my next match, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like win or lose, that's how I was feeling and stuff. Because just having these 2 debates in a row has been a lot for me. I shouldn't have agreed to it, probably. I to do. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I definitely lost that blinder. Unquestioned though. Sorry, I didn't get to finish that thought. Yeah, I didn't. I guess yeah, the whole Star Wars thing. Maybe I should have say like that he didn't pick the 2 worst movies. I didn't think. I guess I didn't think that would come back to bite me. He was clever in that, I suppose. Going through the questions, I didn't get as much about like Mission to Moscow out and stuff. Erick kind of like I maybe was a little more polite than I should have been in that one. I don't think I lost the White Man Can't Jump one. I feel like I won that one pretty handily. And then the other 2 I will definitely completely agree with. Pete got me in Bond and I got him in Will Smith. So yep, that is the way judges go though.
All right, so yeah, with that said, this was a blast. Going into this with him being less experienced and you just being overall nicer and just a chill dude. I was, I'm always nervous on how the flow is going to go, but it went great. Speed round, it's not for everybody, but at the end of the day, I love it just because the pressure. But boom, shout out Tato, shout out our judges, John Marr and Chad Webb. And then shout out, obviously, our players. Congratulations, Erick, now 2-0. And then Tato, he's 1-1. If you're watching us live, we are actually going to be live immediately right after this for Amaru, Moses, and Will Cohen. So see you in a couple minutes.